The America's Democrats podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to americasdemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. This is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. And we say hello to Frank Clemente, Executive Director at Americans for Tax Fairness. Frank, thanks so much for joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast.
Happy to talk with you, Jim. Thanks.
And happy to have you with us. Now, your organization recently posted a press release stating your support for a tax on billionaires proposed by Senator Ron Wyden. What is the billionaires tax and how would it work?
Great. The billionaires income tax is a proposal that has been put on the table during this debate in Congress that's happening right now over the Build Back Better Act. That's the big proposal from President Biden to raise taxes from the wealthy and corporations and use that money, put about $1.75 trillion into healthcare, education, housing, a big effort on combating climate change, paid leave for families, et cetera. So it's a very important, essentially, transfer of wealth from the rich and corporations and using that money to help working families survive well. The billionaires income tax, the theory here is right now, most billionaires do not pay income taxes, or they don't have to pay income taxes. It's optional for them to pay income taxes. Income taxes are only assessed when somebody sells an asset. Billionaires, most of their wealth is tied up in their assets, the stock that they hold, the business that they own, the real estate that they're invested in. If they don't sell it, they don't pay any taxes. By the way, when they do sell it, they pay a much lower tax rate than if they got a salary, almost half. However, let's stay focused. They don't sell their assets. The billionaires income tax is saying essentially, okay, but your wealth is increasing every year. Sometimes you may lose some money, but by and large, you're going up and up and up exponentially. We're going to assess a billionaire's income tax on that increase in your wealth each year, whether you are selling it or not. That will guarantee that you are at least paying some taxes every year, just like a worker pays taxes on their wages, their salary every year. We're going to start assessing a tax on you billionaires on the increased value of your assets, whether you sell them or not. Simple as that. And the tax that would be charged is at the capital gains tax rate, which is about 24%. If they were taking that as income, if they were being paid a salary, they would be paying a 37% tax rate. So actually 37 plus another 4%. So it's a big discounted tax rate, even though we're requiring them to pay the taxes.
Now, this may seem like an obvious question, but why do we need this tax?
Well, because these people aren't paying taxes right now. Most of them aren't. I mean, think about it. Jeff Bezos, you know how much his salary is? How much he takes in salary from Amazon every year? $83,000. Okay. $83,000. That's all he takes in a salary. So he's paying taxes on the $83,000, and he is paying taxes if he sells some of his Amazon stock to buy a big mansion, which he's been known to do. Oh, well, actually, he doesn't have to sell his Amazon stock to buy his big mansion. You know what he does? He simply borrows from the bank at a very low interest rate because the bank has his Amazon stock as collateral. He borrows from the bank to pay for his expensive purchases. He's getting a tax deduction because of interest tax deductions, but he's borrowing that at a very cheap rate, so he doesn't have to sell it. And if he had to sell it, he'd have to pay taxes on it, and that would cost him more than his borrowing costs cost. So he can just continue to borrow year after year, using his Amazon stock as his asset, he's accumulating this dynasty, right? He's now worth about $190 billion, and he can not pay taxes on his entire life. He can then pass it on to his heirs, and when they get it at the $190 billion value. So all of the increase in assets that occurred, increase in value of Amazon stock that occurred under Jeff Bezos year after year after year, went from zero. It was worth nothing when he got it, right? It's now worth $190 billion today. He passes that on to his heirs. All that accumulated increase in value will be passed on to his heirs tax-free under the current law. Huge loophole. We tried to close it in this bill. We weren't able to. But so we're trying to capture that increased value that happens year to year for these billionaires and their assets. And let's tax it just as if it was a wage or a salary that your average working person pays every year. So that's what it's about. It's actually quite simple. We want to have a tax system now that starts rewarding work as much as it's rewarding wealth right now. These people their wealth is really being rewarded because they're not having to pay taxes on it. We want to stop that.
Mm-hmm. What do you consider the key strengths of the current proposal for the billionaires tax? And are there any ways it falls short of what your organization would like to see happen?
Well, one strength is it will raise a lot of money. We just got a estimate from the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is a scorekeeper for the government. They say that this proposal will raise $557 billion over 10 years. That's almost 1/3 the cost of the entire Build Back Better plan, the $1.75 trillion. So it raises a ton of money. And from just 700 people, we have about 750 billionaires in this country. Some of them will not qualify because you have to be a billionaire at least 3 years running. So, but we're talking 700 people contributing this much money. It's a no-brainer. I'd say a drawback to this policy. I mean, I like the policy a lot. We actually think it's quite defensible constitutionally. Even more so than a wealth tax, the kind of wealth tax that Senator Warren had proposed. There are some scholars who question the constitutionality of that. I would like to see the billionaires tax get enacted, and then later on, in later years, we lower the threshold. So it's not just billionaires who would be subject to this, but why not somebody who has $50 million in wealth? Why not somebody who has $10 million in wealth? Why should they escape taxation? If they can live off their assets, not pay taxes on because they don't have to sell them, why should they continue to escape taxation? So, hopefully it is a proposal that could go lower, scoop up more folks into it later on in the years. But let's at least get this thing in place. Let's get the structure in place. Let's have it be defended. Let's have the legal attacks come, which I'm sure they will, by billionaires trying to, take it down. And let's let it survive, and then we can expand it later on.
Absolutely. We're speaking to Frank Clemente, Executive Director at Americans for Tax Fairness. And Frank, your organization, working with the Institute for Policy Studies, recently released a report on how billionaires have fared during this pandemic. What did you find out there?
Yeah, it's a sad story for the rest of us. The billionaires are very happy about it, I'm sure. So we looked at, and this is based on Forbes data. Forbes, folks may know, has a great reputation for every year publishing a report that shows how much billionaire wealth, how much the wealth of the richest Americans has increased. And it's really a billionaire's wealth. And what we found using their data is that from right before the pandemic began in March of 2020 till actually middle of October, the wealth of these 750 billionaires increased by $2.1 trillion. In percentage terms, that's a 70% increase. So getting close to their wealth doubling, but 70% is really a lot. That would be like a person who was making $100,000 before the pandemic began, that they would be making $170,000 today. Now, I don't think most people had a 70% increase in their paycheck from before the pandemic to now. That's what these billionaires have achieved, a 70% increase in their wealth. It's an enormous, staggering sum. As I say, that alone, that $2.1 trillion over 19 months, the increase in their wealth, that would be enough to pay for the Biden Build Back Better plan, which is now estimated to cost $1.75 trillion, more than pay for it. And that's a 10-year plan. And that's a plan that affects tens of millions of Americans, giving them affordable childcare, affordable health care, pre-K, universal pre-K education, $500 billion investment in climate change, protecting us against climate change. So just think about that. So these 700 billionaires, 750 billionaires, they would be just as rich as they were before the pandemic began, even if we took absconded with all the increase in the value of their assets. They would still be as rich as they were before the pandemic began, and we could pay entirely for the Build Back Better plan for 10 years that benefits tens of millions of Americans. I mean, just, the wealth of these folks is really quite staggering.
Just don't cut into Bezos's $83,000 a year, all right? We got to be careful with that.
His salary.
What's the current legislative status of a billionaire's tax, and how much support is it likely to receive on Capitol Hill?
Well, before I say that, let's not forget ProPublica. You remember about 6 months ago, they had gotten this trove of IRS data. All right, it was secretly given to them. It was IRS data from 2014 to 2018, and it was the tax returns of the richest Americans, the 25, actually it was 25 billionaires, and they found that at least 2 years in that period, in the last decade or two, Jeff Bezos didn't pay any income taxes. Musk didn't pay any income taxes in 2018. Bloomberg didn't pay. Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire, he didn't pay income taxes a whole bunch of years. So, and then they also estimated that the average tax rate of these folks over the 5 years they studied, the average tax rate was only a little over 3 percentage points. That's based on looking at how much their stock value increased, their assets increased, and comparing that to the tax, the taxes that they were paying to the IRS. So 3.27%, the average tax rate for all Americans is about 13 percentage points, federal income tax rate. Now, prospects in Congress on the billionaires' income tax specifically, it's a hard slog. It's a hard slog. The proposal was put out there relatively late in the game, after a lot of things had already been baked, so it's a new proposal. It's not like it had been out there sitting around, getting analyzed by members of Congress. However, Senator Sinema, remember we have this huge challenge in the Senate. We got two senators who sort of, I hate to say it, in some ways are dictating what is acceptable and not acceptable. And in fact, she said the House tax plan had rate increases on corporations, had rate increases on individuals, had increases in the capital gains tax rate. She said, forget it. I don't want any of that stuff. And so that's not in the base bill at this point in time. However, she did say she supports the billionaires' income tax. And Senator Manchin has said, sort of conditionally, he supports the billionaires' income tax, although he wants some changes to it. President Biden supports it. So the House is about to pass the plan the week of November 15th. Next week, we're expected to pass the plan. Comes over to the Senate. The Senate will do its own magic, make changes to it. And it's in that context that we have the possibility of getting the billionaires' income tax inside the bill. It's not a guarantee. I'd say it's no better than a 50% chance that it's going to happen, but it is still in play because of who has said they support it. And part of it depends on what the score is, what the folks the scorekeepers, the Congressional Budget Office and Joint Committee on Taxation, they look at, okay, how much does this plan cost and how much revenue are you raising? And is there enough there, or do you need to come up with more revenue? And that provides an opening as well. One way to think about it is that, we've heard that, for instance, Senator Gillibrand from New York, she wants to add paid leave into this program. Paid leave is expensive, a couple $100 billion. That could totally be paid for with the billionaires' income tax.
What about the general public? Is there support there for taxing billionaires?
Yes, we've actually done polling of the public on the billionaires income tax. It's overwhelming support. The way we framed the question was, we asked them, do you support the Build Back Better, President Biden's Build Back Better plan? At that point in time, it was a $3.5 trillion plan. We asked them, do you support that? We explained what the program did. And usually it was like 60-40% support. We then asked, do you like this plan if it was paid for by, we give an explanation of what the billionaire's income tax is, and then it jumps to about 70-30. So it's a pretty dramatic jump in support when they learn how it's paid for. First question we asked, we didn't say how it was paid for. We didn't even say it was paid for. Second question we asked them, we say it's paid for by the billionaire's income tax. So big jump in support. And we also tested this in battleground states and swing congressional districts. The increase in support for it was anywhere from 20% to 40% swing in support of it. The billionaires, the Build Back Better plan was supported, but it got supported much more strongly when it was paid for with the billionaires income tax.
The fight for fair taxes will hardly end with what may or may not be passed on Capitol Hill. How do you envision this issue playing out in the upcoming midterm elections?
Yeah, well, first, I'm very hopeful. Congress will enact the Build Back Better plan. I think it will be at least $1.75 trillion in investments for working families, and it will be fully funded by taxing the wealthy and corporations. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. We're reversing sort of pretty much 40 years of supply side trickle down economics based on tax cuts. The last gasp of it was the 2017 tax cuts that President Trump and the GOP passed, very quickly. So if we enact this legislation, that's a huge win for working families in terms of the benefits they're going to get to make life better, to help them afford costs more. And it's a huge win in terms of making the tax system fair. That debate itself will play out in the elections next year. It will be a major debate. What did you get? The Republicans will attack the tax increases that were in there. They will claim there are increases on working families. They are not. No one making under $400,000 a year is going to face higher taxes under this plan. Nevertheless, the Republicans will prosecute that lie, and Democrats will be forced to defend it. If we don't get the billionaire's income tax into this bill, I believe we've set the debate up sufficiently in the debate we're having right now, that the billionaire's income tax will be an important part of the debate next year. We are very cognizant, very unhappy about the fact that if this legislation passes without taxing billionaires, without some sort of a direct tax on billionaires, most of the reforms in this legislation are not going to be taxing billionaires, unfortunately. They really are not going to be. And that is very hard to swallow, since these are the folks who are, benefiting the most from the current system, since they have benefited the most during the pandemic, and since wealth inequality has become so extreme in this country, and they are the poster child for how bad things have become. So it will be, a real loss if we cannot tax them directly in this in the bill that's going through Congress right now, Build Back Better plan. And we will make it a big issue in the elections next year if that's if the case is that we did not enact that reform.
Okay, very good. Frank Clemente, Executive Director at Americans for Tax Fairness, joining us today on the America's Democrats podcast. Frank, appreciate your time with us today. Would love to do it again soon.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Thank you. You too. And this is the America's Democrats podcast, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen to this americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
Right before our eyes, an invaluable American species is fast disappearing from view. Kartoonus Americanus. These are newspaper cartoonists who've long delighted readers and infuriated power elites. And there's nothing natural about their sudden decline. It's not the result of a dwindling talent pool and certainly not due to a lack of political targets. Rather, what's happening is that their media habitat is being intentionally destroyed. Around the start of the 20th century, some 2,000 newspapers featured their own full-time cartoonists. But in just the last decade, those healthy media environments have shriveled. So now, only a couple of dozen newspapers have these vibrant artistic journalists on staff. One major reason is that most U.S. papers have been gobbled up by profiteering hedge funds that have merged, purged, and plundered these essential local sources of news and democratic discourse. The overriding interest of these Wall Street owners is to cash out a paper's financial assets and haul off the booty to boost their personal wealth. Journalism and democracy be damned. Thus, they view cartoonists as a paycheck that can be easily diverted into their corporate pockets, dismissing the fact that enjoying good local cartoonists ranks as one of the top reasons people give for buying the paper. Note that this mass extermination is not old-school media censorship, but sleight-of-hand money censorship by the new monopolistic order of newspapering. Political cartoonists are still free to express any opinion they want, but the Wall Street system locks them out of their primary marketplace. Censorship is ugly, but eliminating paychecks, well, that's just business. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet, these freewheeling spirits of the cartooning craft are inventing new ways to connect with America's strong demand for their fun and important work. To connect with them, go to editorialcartoonist.com. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
This Social Security measure, I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Is there even a Republican Party today, or is it the Trump Party?
It is the Trump Party. It is a full manifestation of Trumpism, whatever that is, which at its core is literally the personality of one individual. It's not philosophically grounded. It is not politically moored. It is not ideologically oriented towards anything other than whatever Donald Trump is feeling that day. That's evidenced by the fact that the party has no platform. It is not laid out to the country what it is for or what it is against with clarity and definition. So, yeah, it makes it hard. Of course, then you get the question that I get all the time is, then why the hell are you still a Republican?
Yeah. Right.
And my response is because it pisses them off. I, along with a few others, want to remain a mirror, can hold up the mirror to reflect back to the party exactly what it is it's doing, and how it's behaving, and trying to not just warn, but reorient its course away from authoritarianism, white nationalism, Trumpism, and back towards those Lincoln principles that have defined me as a Republican since 1976.
What happened? It wasn't so long ago that certainly the Republican Party was a serious, viable political alternative. You led it at one time at the national level.
Yeah.
What happened? What happened, and how fast could it have happened?
Well, that's a very good question, Bill. And what I think people should realize is that this was not something that happened in 5 years or 4 years under Trump. This is something that has been in large measure a work in progress going back to the late 1950s, where political calculations and the connection to power began to take root inside the party, a party that was fearful of winning the presidency, of not winning the presidency, keeping in mind that Eisenhower was the last Republican president before 1968, and the Nixonian calculations that were oriented by individuals like Goldwater and McCarthy and others, who saw political value in pulling disaffected Democrats, particularly in the South. Remember, the way you won the presidency in the up to that point was going through the South. The South was largely Democratic; it was entirely Democratic. The North was largely Republican, and to win the South, you had to go play there politically. Again, to emphasize the point is the reason why Kennedy went to Dallas in that fateful day in November was to shore up the Democrats' hold on Texas. Because there was fear that a lot of the politics was shifting away from the Democrats, particularly around the issue of civil rights. And so when Goldwater declared at our 64 convention that he was basically rejecting the cause of civil rights on behalf of Republicans. That famous line, what was it?
Extremism.
Right. Extremism without is no vice. And basically, and so the reality of the party began to shift. You had the rise of the John Birch Society, the rise of that level of extremism. You had folks inside the party push back against that, just as they pushed back. Margaret Chase pushed back against McCarthyism.
Joe McCarthy, right?
Yeah, and so where you find the party now, after Nixon cut his bargain in the late 1960s, the Southern strategy to win those disaffected white votes once Johnson signed on to the civil rights platform after Kennedy's assassination. You saw that seed germinating more and more. And we find ourselves now here, 60 years later, looking at a party that is now wholesale into that Southern strategy, if you will. And it goes to one of the reasons why I gave a speech that I believe was at the National Press Club in 2009 or early 2010 as national chairman, declaring the Southern strategy was over, that the party would no longer embrace this form of racism and white nationalism, that we saw the future in a multicultural, diverse America for the GOP, one that our values and principles would, I think, be competitive, if not embraced by a lot of Americans. And that has not played out the way I'd hoped it would.
Well, Trump brought it back for sure. Trump was shameless, right, in accepting the support of white supremacists.
Absolutely.
And yet the leadership of the party did not stand up to him. I was just thinking this week, Dick Cheney. I thought, remarkable gesture to accompany his daughter to the prayer service to pay homage and honor to the Capitol police officers who defended them last January 6th. And only Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney showed up. And Dick Cheney said to Jonathan Karl from ABC News, I'm sure you saw this quote, I'm deeply disappointed we don't have better leadership in the Republican Party to restore the Constitution. Do you share that feeling?
Oh my gosh, absolutely, I do. In fact, it has been the essence, the reason why a lot of what we've seen play out has played out the way it has, because the men and women who make up that leadership inside the GOP have full-throatedly capitulated their dignity, the essence of their leadership, whatever that was up to that point, to Trump. And out of what? Fear of what? Concern about what? Nothing broad and all embracing as the fate of our nation, the future of democracy, etc. But because they don't want Donald Trump to tweet something nasty about them, or they don't want this small portion of the base to be ticked off at them, and they don't want to be threatened, and they're such snowflakes. There's such, I find it ironic that, the party that whines about cancel culture plays so heavily in canceling the culture inside of its own party. Witness what they've done to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and others who have stood up, how they've gone after Mitt Romney for taking a principled position on big matters. So that leadership quality for me is core. You can't function as a national party, as a governing authority, if your leaders are a pile of crap. And they are. Witness, I give you Ted Cruz, who said the right thing on the heels leading into the anniversary of January 6th.
Right.
And then went on national television on Fox because Tucker Carlson called him out and just completely caved.
Right. Basically, Ted Cruz said, if you're in a Black Lives Matter movement protest and you assault a cop, you're a terrorist. But if you're part of the January 6th crowd and you assault a police officer, you're a patriot.
You're a patriot, right. Which is, for all of that brain power and education he got at Harvard or wherever the hell he went to school, if I were the university, I was like, dude, just tear up the diploma and please do not associate your name with our institution ever again, because we don't graduate people that stupid. And so, you can have all the book sense in the world, but as my mama used to say to me, baby, you don't have common sense, you ain't no good to nobody.
Is Trump
and not? And he's not.
Yeah.
As a leader in the party, he's not of any use to anybody except Donald Trump. I mean, this is the man who allowed his wife to be called ugly, his father to be associated with the assassination of President Kennedy, and he doesn't have the you-know-what to stand up and go, dude, are you kidding me? Shut the hell up. Yeah. No, what does he do is he embraces it, Bill. And that is just, again, symptomatic of a deep rot inside the GOP when it comes to the leadership of the party.
And I mean, you and I have been around politics a long time. I find it hard to believe that Donald Trump, he's a former president, but that he's really that powerful. I mean,
he's not.
What can he do to these guys?
Look, what can he do? He's sitting on all this cash inside of his super PAC, and he's not spending it on any of the candidates he supposedly endorses.
Exactly.
B, the RNC is paying his daggone legal bills. C, when Glenn Youngkin is shown at a minimum, I can do the Heisman well enough just to avoid having any conflict with him. So there's no relevance of Donald Trump to the body politic unless you make him relevant. And the reason they continue to do that is because the grift involved for both cash and power is enormous. And that's something that I fought inside the RNC to the point where literally within 30 days after I got the RNC, when I cut off a lot of the back end money, they came after me. It's the worst chairman ever. We got to get rid of him. And so That's the truth inside the party. The grift for power and money is real. And they will forsake Lincoln, Reagan, their mama, if they come between them, that power and that money. And Trump is in many ways sort of symbolizes that because no matter what he says, how far out there he goes, and the minions who follow him, as long as the money flows and the power is there to be amassed, why should we give up on a good thing? The country be damned.
Is there any way you can explain Kevin McCarthy?
Probably I would much rather have a limp noodle as Speaker of the House, because then at least I know what I got, right? With Kevin, this pretense that there is something there is a joke. One. Two, he has no governing agenda because he has no vision. And because he has no vision, there will be nothing from which he can go to the American people to talk about governing. I keep asking the question, if you said you did not want the country to go down the road that the Republicans had set it on during the term of Donald Trump, why the hell would you then look at reestablishing their power and giving them the power by turning the House back over to them and possibly the Senate in 2022? Because what do you think you're going to get? What do you think Kevin McCarthy is going to do as Speaker of the House, except hold hearings investigating Nancy Pelosi and every Democrat he can think of? What do you think Mitch McConnell's going to? Mitch McConnell, for good, bad, or whatever, has already told you, I'm not passing any of the Biden agenda if we have the majority. Whether it's policy, whether it's Supreme Court, judges, nothing's happening. Everything is going to be geared towards 2024. If you don't like what you see happening around the states with the rollback of voting rights and the roll-up of opportunities for people to access the ballot box, what do you think is going to happen in 2023, 2024, going into those elections? So, I think the idea of a Speaker McCarthy is not good for the country. I'd rather see, a Speaker Cheney, which I know probably won't happen.
Do you believe Donald Trump is going to run in 2024, or is he just faking it?
I think he's doing both. I think part of him is running and the other part is faking it. Now, why do I say that? Because that's how Donald Trump approaches everything.
Yeah.
He's not in until he is. He's in until he isn't. And you need to understand what that means. And what it means is very simply this: I will manipulate and use the system against itself as long as the system allows me to do that. Meaning, we give a damn. Mm-hmm. We care whether or not he runs. I quite honestly could care less if Donald Trump runs again, because I already know where I stand. The minute it gets out that he's seriously thinking about it, I'm on the point to stop it, right? Inside the party, outside the party. The worst thing we could ever do is go back to that. Secondly, the worst thing we could do is to nominate someone who is associated with that. So that's the, DeSantis's and the Cruz's, the Josh Hawleys. Talk about the king of fake. Seriously,
yeah, right.
Stop it. Don't even think you with your peace power fists up in the air to insurrectionists. So for me, it's a very clear delineation. My hope is to bring that clarity to the American people so they will see it as clearly as I do. Make up your own mind. You can still see something clearly and go, well, nah, I don't want to do clear. I just want to keep the glasses of fog on. Great. But at least you then can't say I didn't know or I wasn't aware. So as long as Donald Trump is out there pretending he's going to run or actually looking to run, there need to be voices in the mix that say, wait a minute, y'all need to understand what's happening here.
If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.